Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. Today we're exploring a truly fascinating cultural and economic phenomenon unfolding in China's Jiangsu province, a booming amateur football league. The Economist recently brought this to light, painting a picture of an ingenious, almost accidental solution to some very pressing challenges facing China right now. But is this story really what it seems? We're going to, pull back the curtain and really dig into this.
Exactly. What's so compelling here is how something as seemingly simple as local football can be interpreted in, so many different ways, from a pure morale booster for the public to a potential economic stimulus.
Right.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the economists, quite breezy take might be missing some crucial nuances.
Okay.
We'll explore if this success story holds up under a harder, more critical look for you today. On the surface, this football league looks like a brilliant quick fix. But dig deeper, and you'll see it's a fascinating microcosm of China's bigger economic struggle. A clever distraction, yes, but far from a real solution to its deepest, most stubborn challenges.
Okay, let's start by laying out the Economist's core arguments, the way they frame this phenomenon. First, they suggest this amateur league, known as Suqiao, is an almost accidental Keynesian stimulus.
Mm-hmm.
For those unfamiliar, that's essentially a government-orchestrated boost to demand designed to inject spending into the economy, in this case, maybe to distract from the pain of the ongoing trade war and the significant challenge of youth unemployment.
Yeah, that's the idea presented.
And they cite some pretty striking evidence. We're talking 40,000-seat stadiums regularly selling out completely. Imagine that spectacle.
It's quite a visual.
Tickets are even being scalped for 60 times their original price, and there's been a whopping 90% surge in beer deliveries across the province since the league kicked off in May. Those are incredibly eye-catching numbers, painting a picture of booming local activity.
They certainly grab your attention.
Secondly, The Economist highlights what they call an authentic vibe surrounding the league. They claim this grassroots competition, with its fierce city rivalries and notionally egalitarian rosters where local talent takes center stage, provides a sense of purity. This, they argue, starkly contrasts with China's professional football league, which has been plagued by scandal and corruption for years.
A familiar story there, unfortunately.
Fans in Suzhou, for instance, are quoted saying the league feels truly pure, overlooking the fact that these are amateur players. It sounds almost too good to be true, this narrative of clean, community-driven sport.
It does have that appealing ring to it.
And finally, The Economist argues that Jiangsu province itself is uniquely positioned for this success to endure. They point to the region's considerable wealth, its excellent infrastructure,
Good infrastructure.
the fact that all 13 competing cities boast world-class stadiums, certainly not something every province can claim, and a crucial first-mover advantage. All these factors, The Economist suggests, mean Suqiao will last much longer than past fad economy crazes that China has seen, like the short-lived Zibo barbecue mania, or the oily soup pilgrimages that quickly rose and then fizzled out. So their take is that this isn't just another flash in the pan, it's got real staying power.
That's a compelling argument, and those numbers are impressive on the surface. Definitely. But this raises an important question for us. How much of this success is a genuine, sustainable economic impact? And how much is simply spectacle, designed to create a feeling of prosperity?
Right, the substance versus the show.
Exactly. While those crowds are undeniably impressive. 60,000 fans per blockbuster match day, that's absolutely significant for any sporting event. The cold, hard economic math tells a very different and far more sobering story.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's break it down. If every full stadium, with fans spending an average of, say, $150 per person on tickets and concessions, nets San 9 million, that translates to roughly US $1.2 million per match day.
1.2 million US dollars.
Okay. Now, compare that figure to Suzhou's monthly export loss. In May alone, Suzhou experienced an approximate US $2 billion plunge in exports.
$2 billion.
Billion. Primarily resulting from a 34.5% year-on-year drop in China to U.S. shipments under average 51% tariffs.
Wow.
When you put that into perspective, the Suqiao League is clearly a morale tonic, a feel-good story, absolutely. But it is absolutely not a macroeconomic cushion for such immense economic pain. It's a very, very small drop in a gargantuan bucket of challenges.
Wow, that certainly puts things into perspective. It goes from looking like a major economic driver to a very localized boost.
Precisely.
And speaking of fads, The Economist itself mentions China's fad economy playbook, almost as a disclaimer. But if it's so different, why does it sound so familiar? Are we seeing signs that this league might, despite the rosy outlook, also just burn out like those others?
That's a critical observation, and the answer is absolutely yes. We see those signs. Tourism scholars have a specific term for these kinds of viral spikes. They call them flash consumption or 消费快讯.
Flash consumption. Okay.
This isn't just about something being popular for a short time. It describes a rapid, incredibly intense surge in popularity for a specific trend, often fueled by social media virality, that then tends to fade just as quickly as it ignited.
Right, like a firework.
Exactly. We saw it vividly with Zibo's barbecue mania in 2023. That phenomenon drew over 240,000 May Day visitors, injecting a burst of energy into the city. But within 8 months, passenger traffic had returned almost entirely to baseline levels.
8 months.
The excitement had simply evaporated. And if you look at the crowd graphs for Jiangsu's league, they already show week-to-week volatility. The novelty is clearly wearing off for some, and attendance isn't consistently at those peak, sold-out levels.
So the initial frenzy is maybe cooling off.
It seems so. Unless Suchao can somehow add durable revenue streams, and we're talking serious long-term investments like monetized media rights deals, national broadcast agreements, or the establishment of robust income-generating youth academies that feed talent into the professional system, it risks suffering the exact same fade-out fate as Zibo. Initial excitement, no matter how intense, simply isn't enough for sustained economic impact.
That makes sense. It needs a deeper root system, not just a superficial bloom. And what about the jobs angle? The Economist suggests this league provides a welcome distraction from youth unemployment, which we know is a pressing issue across China.
A huge issue.
But is this truly creating sustainable, meaningful jobs that address the deeper structural issues of joblessness, especially for graduates?
Yes.
Or is it more of a temporary Band-Aid?
This is truly where it gets really interesting, and frankly, the youth jobs math is brutal. Consider Jiangsu's electronics hub, particularly Kunshan, which is a major manufacturing center.
Okay.
Even before the trade war began, this region was facing youth joblessness pushing back towards 17%. And now, in the wake of trade tensions and global economic shifts, they're dealing with what amounts to disguised layoffs.
Disguised layoffs, how does that work?
Like those seen at Foxconn in May 2024, where workers might not be formally fired, but their hours are drastically cut or they're put on indefinite leave. It keeps them technically employed,
But they're not really working or earning properly.
Exactly. While the Suchao League does offer roles, stadium ushers, food stall operators, merchandise vendors, even some local security, these are overwhelmingly seasonal or gig positions.
Temporary work, mostly.
Yes. They might temporarily paper over the unemployment stats, making the numbers look slightly less dire, and they certainly provide some immediate income for individuals. However, they absolutely do not replace the stable factory wages, the comprehensive social insurance, or the long-term career prospects that formal sector jobs provide.
Got it.
It's a superficial fix, a temporary distraction, but it's not a structural solution to a deep-seated economic problem. It's important to distinguish between creating activity and creating sustainable employment.
That's a crucial distinction. It highlights the difference between a morale booster and a genuine economic recovery. Now, the article also touches on something quite sensitive. Cadres, or local officials, actively stoking city-against-city chauvinism and rivalry. Beijing usually polices against Zhou, or micro-regionalism, quite rigorously, viewing it as potentially divisive. So is this a risky gamble for provincial stability, or is it a calculated risk that Jiangsu can afford to take?
This raises a profoundly important question about internal governance and control within China. You're absolutely right. Provincial propaganda departments across the country typically work hard to suppress Zhou or micro-regionalism.
They don't usually like that kind of local rivalry getting too heated.
No, it's often seen as a potential threat to national unity and social cohesion, especially in a country as vast and diverse as China, which has a long history of regional identities. Yet in Jiangsu, we're seeing cadres actively fanning these very flames.
So they're encouraging it.
It seems so.
Yeah.
They are betting that this intense intercity rivalry will monetize faster and more effectively through ticket sales, local sponsorships, and civic pride than it will fracture provincial cohesion or lead to any undesirable political outcomes.
A calculating gamble, then.
Now, this might very well work, at least for a time, in Jiangsu. It's a relatively rich coastal province with excellent transport links, a strong common economic interest, and a generally stable social environment. The stakes are perhaps perceived as lower there.
Maybe they think they can control it there?
Perhaps. However, the true risk emerges if this model is simply copy-pasted or encouraged into poorer, more historically fractious inland regions. Take Henan, for example, which has its own fledgling amateur league, but it's averaged fewer than 6,000 spectators per match.
Much smaller scale.
Much smaller. In such areas where economic grievances might be higher and social stability more delicate, actively promoting regional chauvinism could indeed look incredibly risky and potentially divisive. It's a very delicate balance they're playing with, walking a tightrope between leveraging local identity for economic gain and inadvertently sowing seeds of discontent.
A tightrope indeed.
And finally, let's talk about integrity, which is vital for any sport's long-term health. The Economist praises the league's authentic feel, suggesting it's partly due to surprisingly loose sponsorship rules.
Right, the Heineken and barbecue stalls example.
Exactly. We're talking about everything from global brands to local businesses being visible. This anything-goes approach is lauded for its grassroots appeal, but this stands in stark contrast to the Chinese Football Association, the CFA.
The official governing body.
Yes, which, for its professional leagues, mandates positive social image brands and has very strict rules about who can sponsor and how money flows.
So a big difference in oversight.
Huge. The danger here is significant, very fragile, it's a thin line, and potentially a very slippery slope between promoting a vibrant, local, authentic feel and opening the door to corruption that could irrevocably damage the league's reputation and longevity.
Those are some incredibly powerful counterpoints, painting a much more complex picture than maybe the initial article suggested. So what does this all mean in the broader economic and social strategies of China? What deeper context might The Economist have maybe skimmed over?
Well, if we truly connect this to the bigger picture, Su Chao fits squarely within Beijing's broader central strategy to fundamentally shift China's economic growth engine.
Okay, how so?
For decades, growth has been export-led, right? Fueled by manufacturing for the world. But now, Beijing is urgently pushing for a consumption-led model driven by domestic demand.
The internal circulation idea.
Precisely. The government projects that mainland travelers alone will spend a record $7 trillion, that's roughly US $968 billion on local trips in 2025. This strategy explicitly uses cheap leisure, like local tourism and regional sporting events, as a spark plug to ignite domestic spending.
So things like Su Chao are seen as tools for that larger goal.
Exactly. The Politburo's April Plan, which pledges income boosts for citizens, service sector expansion, and significant urban renewal, explicitly positions amateur leagues like Su Chao as low-cost complements to this grand strategy. They are meant to be small, localized drivers of activity, yes, but they are clearly not substitutes for large-scale fiscal stimulus or fundamental economic reform.
Complements, not substitutes. Got it.
They are one small, visible piece of a much, much larger puzzle aimed at internalizing economic growth and making China less dependent on external markets.
Makes sense.
However, the strategy also highlights a longer-term and rather significant vulnerability for China. While Beijing is fervently pushing domestic consumption and internalizing demand, research from sources like RAND finds that China is still significantly exposed to tech controls and geopolitical pressures, despite its diversification efforts.
Meaning the domestic push isn't enough on its own.
It can't insulate them completely. Take Jiangsu's electronics belt, a huge part of its economy. That entire region remains profoundly hostage to tariff swings, global supply chain dynamics, and the critical flow of advanced semiconductors.
Things way beyond football.
Way beyond. These are deep structural vulnerabilities that simply cannot be offset by domestic spending on football matches or barbecue. Football, no matter how popular, no matter how many tickets are sold or beers delivered, simply cannot hedge against semiconductor choke points or the broader geopolitical pressures that impact core industries.
Right.
It's a significant, fundamental vulnerability that even the most enthusiastic domestic consumption cannot fully address. And that's a crucial part of the context that's easily overlooked when you focus just on the cheering crowds.
So after pulling back the curtain on this, what's the ultimate takeaway for us, the listener? Is Jiangsu Su Chao just a local curiosity, a fleeting moment of viral marketing, or is it a sign of something bigger, something we should be paying closer attention to on a national or even global scale?
Well, I think Jiangsu Suqiao is undoubtedly a masterclass in viral place marketing. It brilliantly channels local pride, it keeps those beer taps flowing, and it certainly makes for jubilant drone footage. No question.
That looks good.
It looks great. It's a very colorful, compelling subplot in China's unfolding economic narrative. Yet, in sheer economic tonnage, it's undeniably a rounding error compared with the plunging exports that province is facing and the stubborn systemic issue of youth joblessness.
The numbers just don't compare.
Not even close. The bigger story here, the one that truly matters for you to understand, is Beijing's urgent, almost desperate search for homegrown consumption fixes to pivot its economy. And of these fixes, amateur football is a visible, a very high-profile, but ultimately low-impact component.
Visible, but low impact.
It's a fascinating symptom of a larger economic strategy, but it is certainly not the cure for China's deepest economic woes.
Okay, so what should we be watching for then, going forward?
Right. For you to consider going forward, here are the real metrics to watch, the things that will truly tell us about the longevity and impact of this phenomenon. First, can Jiangsu truly monetize broadcast and streaming rights nationwide?
The media deals.
Exactly. If this league can secure significant recurring revenue from national media deals, that would be a true game changer for its long-term sustainability. Second, how will the Chinese Football Association, the CFA, respond if early scandals emerge, perhaps involving match fixing or player transfers?
The integrity question again.
Will they tighten sponsorship and player transfer oversight, or will they let the purity claim erode? That will be a major test. Third, consider replication. If wealthier football-mad cities in other provinces, like those in Guangdong, succeed with their own similar leagues.
Will it dilute the Jiangsu model?
It could. Suqiao's much-touted first-mover advantage might shrink significantly, diluting its uniqueness and impact. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, the real test of the league's lasting economic impact will be seen in the labor indicators.
The jobs piece.
Ultimately, whether Kunshan's jobless university graduates find stable, well-paying factory floors, or if they are still primarily only finding temporary food stall gigs outside the stadium turnstiles, that will be the clearest indicator of whether this is merely a distraction or a genuine driver of economic opportunity.
It's truly fascinating how a local football phenomenon can tell us so much about national economic strategies and deeper social pressures. From ancient city rivalries reignited to the very modern challenges of youth unemployment and shifting global trade. This exploration really shows us that what often appears on the surface is just a small part of a much larger, more complex story.
It really does.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other viral successes or seemingly simple solutions are out there, serving perhaps as a distraction or just a temporary morale boost, while the deeper, more powerful economic currents turn underneath? We invite you to consider this question as you go about your week.